Right there, I was actually just trying to check my audio, but I stopped it, so we'll keep going here. Another video. Break this into small bite-sized pieces. So, a couple miles over, same county, Barroom Bill here. He's a dashing cowhand, likes to impress the ladies in the bar, the dance hall. He's also late in his stock, and he's sitting there saying, gee, I've got plenty of beans and plenty of peaches, but I really kind of like fresh fruit a lot more than beans. I like to not have quite the body odor that the beans produce. And he sits down and says, you know what? Upon reflection, I think I probably should have purchased only 10 cases of beans and 25 cases of peaches. However, you know what? It's what we are where we are, and I'm grateful for what I have. And so he settles in for the winter as well. Now, before the passes get covered in snow, before the roads are unpassable, the saddle tramp wanders through. And the saddle tramp is basically just a wandering trader, and he stops in, and as is customary in much of this, or was customary in much of this country 100 years ago, you put strangers up for the night if they were traveling through. And so Sam, he stops through, and Sam in his little sheep hut cooks him some beans and maybe some peaches, and they start chatting, and maybe they drink some whiskey, and Sam bemoans the fact that he only has 20 cases of beans and 20 cases of peaches, and that he really kind of wishes he had had some more beans, even at the cost of a loss of some peaches. The saddle tramp, of course, says, makes conversation, marks this away, notes it, and then the next morning gets up and wanders on down the road. And the next night, he finds himself over at Bill's bunkhouse, and he, again, over lots of beans and peaches, as well as probably a fair bit of whiskey, they sit down and they chat, and in amongst everything else that Barroom Bill regales the saddle tramp with, he mentions the fact that, gee, he kind of wishes he had stocked up on a few more cases of peaches and a few fewer cases of beans. But that he's grateful for what he has, that he has enough food to make it through the winter. So next morning, the saddle tramp's been thinking this over all night, and he says, you know what, Bill, I think I can fix this for you, or I can at least address this for you. And they've developed a bond of trust over the evening, and so he says to Bill, would you be willing to give me, so I'm going to give you, let's see, you give me, and this is where I always have to think here, right? He says, I will give you, so you give me 10 cases, so you loan me those 10 cases of beans, and I'll be back in 2 days' time with 5 cases of peaches. So you're going to lose 10, but I promise you, you're going to gain 5. And Bill says, you know what? That would have been a little bit happier with this. This is what I preferred. I would have been just as well off if I had 10 and 24. You're offering to make me even better than I currently am by putting me in a situation where I have 10 and 25. Yep, let's do this. And so he hands over his 10 cases of beans, and the saddle tramp drops them to his pony and disappears over the ridgeline. And Bill goes about playing solitaire and other things that you do in a bunkhouse by yourself in a Montana winter, which is starting to feel like where we're at here. So similar deal. Of course, without PlayStation or internet. The saddle tramp, meanwhile, wanders back across town, or across the county, there's no town here, across the prairie, and he shows up at Sam's place and he says, hey, Sam, you know what? I happen to have 10 cases of beans here. Just like you wanted it. Just like you said you'd be better off if you had an extra 10 cases of beans. But the deal, of course, is going to be that you're going to have to, I'll make this, in order for you to be better off, you're going to need, right? So the 12 was equivalent. So if we wanted to think about what would make him just as well off, he would have been just as happy with 30 and 12. The Saddle Tramp says, no, I'll do better than just making you as well off. I'll give you an extra can of, or an extra case of peaches. And so in effect, I'll give you these 10 cases of beans if you give me 7 cases of peaches. Of course, what does Sam say? He sits and he thinks, and he says, I would have been just as well off if he had offered to give me 10 cans of beans in exchange for 8, or 10 cases of beans in exchange for 8 cases of peaches. And I'm definitely better off if I only have to give up 7 cases of peaches. So he does the deal, right? So he now has 30 and he has 13. Bill is down 10, and he's not up 5 yet, but these 10 cases, the Saddle Tramp has relocated from in Bill's bunkhouse over to Sam's sheep shed. Say that 15 times fast. And of course, he spends the night, they drink some more whiskey, and the next morning, the Saddle Tramp wanders back over and finds Bill, and he says, here's your 5 cases of peaches. And Bill's thrilled about this, right? He gave up 10 cases of beans. He's now at 10 and 25, which is better than he was at 20 and 20. In this case, there are gains to be had from trade because we have different preferences. I set this up with the same endowments. They have the same starting amounts, but they have different preferences. Therefore, there are gains to be had from trade. So they're both better off. They're happy about this. They have a much nicer winter than they otherwise would. They have the mix of food that they would like to have. And so once the spring thaw happens, or in our case, once the COVID-19 situation abates and we all find ourselves at the grocery store, or in this case, Sam and Bill end up going into town to stock back up on beans, peaches, and whiskey, and they get to talking. And Sam says, this really cool thing happened to me this fall as I was getting ready for the winter. So this guy came by and he said, I think I can make your life better. And he went off. He came to me with this deal that made me better off. And Bill says, the same thing happened to me. It was really cool. I was willing to settle in with the beans and peaches that I had. But then this guy kind of out of the blue showed up and said, here, I've got a better offer for you. It was phenomenal. So they chat some more. And then they say, wait, what'd that guy look like? And they realize it was the same person. And then they do a little bit more talking and they go, wait, what happened? And what do they discover? Is that somewhere between Sam giving up his peaches and getting his beans, and Bill giving up his beans and getting his peaches, what happened? Somewhere along the way, 2 cases of peaches disappeared. And I suddenly say, you know what? He ripped us off. We both could have been better off if we had figured out this trade directly, right? You think they're happy about the Saddle Tramp? Probably not. The next time the Saddle Tramp comes through town, what do you think they're going to say to them? Bill's probably going to go down the road and grab Sam, and they're going to get together and threaten to beat the guy up and say, you ripped us off, right? We could have been a lot better off. Of course, if you're the Saddle Tramp, what might you say? What did the Saddle Tramp do? Obviously, they would have been better off trading. They would have had 2 extra cases of peaches. Would have been a better deal. So what would you say if you were the middleman or the Saddle Tramp in this situation? What did the Saddle Tramp do? Hopefully you're thinking that yes, there were gains to be had from trade before, but it's not straightforward to necessarily find people or negotiate. Now, I assumed away the enforcement issue entirely in that last example. So the Saddle Tramp could say, look, I performed a service for you. You were both better off than before. And what was that service? In effect, what did the Saddle Tramp do? The Saddle Tramp reduced their ignorance. It wasn't until the spring that they realized this deal that there were gains to be had from trade. But by the Saddle Tramp being alert to this and discovering this, both Sam and Bill functioned as though they were aware of this situation. Maybe not fully aware, because there were these 2 cases. But in effect, the Saddle Tramp can say, look, I reduced. Now again, Saddle Tramp probably wouldn't want to do this. in this historical situation because he'd end up with a black eye. But if I was a saddle tramp and had you all as Sam and Bill, I'd say, look, I performed a service, and the service was I reduced transaction costs. I made it easier to find, and then I negotiated with you. Basically, I was how you found each other. And so this is why, at the end of the day, despite the fact that I've said that many of you aren't going to buy your ties from people in Iraq, many of you are going to buy your ties from the producers in Turkey. Now, you're not going to buy them from them directly. You may well buy them from Men's Warehouse. And Men's Warehouse is, you're going to strike a deal with them that you think is a reasonable deal. And the people in Turkey who are manufacturing these ties are going to strike a deal with the middlemen that they think is a good deal. By the way, middlemen, middle women, middle people, I apologize for the gendered use of this term. I've yet to, it's not meant to be that, although historically in the American West, there were not a lot of single women wandering around on their own, for good or for ill. Okay, so the middleman provided a service, and in the process, what happened? He moved resources from lower to higher valued uses. He moved 10 cases of beans from Bill's plate over to Sam's plate. And those beans were more valuable over on Sam's plate than Bill's plate. In the meantime, he moved 5 cases of peaches from Sam over to Bill, where those 5 cans of peaches had greater value over here on Bill's plate. And he also moved these 2 cases that were arguably more valuable in his possession than in Sam's. So the middlemen, just like before, moved, when we've talked about trade, the middleman moves resources from lower to higher valued uses when they're successful. They can still make mistakes just like anybody else. In effect, middlemen specialize in information provision, information about scarcity, information about valuation. Again, middlemen and entrepreneurs, and we're going to need to talk more about entrepreneurship, but middlemen and entrepreneurs are how trades we oftentimes end up taking advantage of gains from trade.